All right. Looks like we're live. All right, so trying something very different today. So today I've got 3 cameras, so if I'm looking all over the place, it's not because I'm helter-skelter, it's because I got 2 phones and a laptop camera that I'm using here. So yeah, so for the ones that are on Facebook, I apologize, I'm using the phone. I don't know how to reverse the mirror, but if you want to go to the happiness coaching group, that is being broadcast live there. You can also go to my TikTok channel and check it out there, and you can watch and read what's on the screen. But I will be uploading this video replay to my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125, and that's on YouTube. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a really good subject, and I think this is going to be the last time that I'm going to do this on my Facebook Live. From now on, I'm going to be doing the happiness coaching training within my new Facebook group that I've created, which is the Happiness Coach. And so if you want to go over to Facebook and sign up there and make sure you answer all the questions, I'm being really selective as to who gets into the group because I want to make sure that it's a safe place for everybody to be able to share. And this is free coaching that I'm giving for people to help them with their emotions, help them on a personal level so that they can shift from dealing with negative emotions, whether that's depression or anxiety, frustration, anger, anything that you're having a hard time dealing with, and helping you shift that to get you into a happier place. So I will be doing free training in the Happiness Coach Facebook group. So go over there, request to join, and make sure you answer all those questions. All right, so today's training, we're going to be talking about the healing power of anger. Okay, and you might be like, I don't know, Tina, what are you talking about? The healing power of anger. Isn't anger destructive? Isn't it a bad thing? Shouldn't we can control our anger? Of course. But not acknowledging our anger is even worse. And so have you ever thought to yourself, like when you get in those angry states and think, man, if I had force choke powers, I would probably end up in jail. That's the kind of anger I'm talking about today, okay? And as you go through this healing journey, it is natural, it is normal for you to go through a stage of anger. In fact, if you try to skip it, you won't actually heal. It'll just go underground and you will find yourself stuck in states of depression, of just not knowing where this feeling, why you can't feel like you can be happy, why you feel stuck, why you feel numb about certain things. And so dealing with anger actually is a good sign in your healing journey, in your journey towards happiness. Now, there's certain things that we're going to cover to make sure that you do this in a way that is healthy anger instead of unhealthy anger, and we're going to talk about a few different strategies. So, like, think of the times, can you think of times when you have been like Bart Simpson's dad, Homer, and he's going after Bart because Bart just ticked him off, and he's just like, why you little wanting to choke the life out of him, right? See, force choke powers would not be good for me. It would be too easy. Or even in the movie like Bruce Almighty, where he gets God's powers and then he takes it back on the news anchor that stole his position and that he got passed over for, and then he does all the every time that he goes to try and talk. I'm like, yeah, I could see myself being petty like that. And so as we go through and we start to deal with anger, I'm making light of it right now, but it doesn't feel light at the time. It can feel very destructive. And especially if you are at the point where you feel like your blood is about to boil and you want to put your fist through a wall. And I know this isn't normal for most women to talk about anger, although we do feel anger. Absolutely, we do feel anger. And it's just usually for women a lot of times, and I think sometimes for men too, think of being in like say like a work situation where you know there's certain behaviors that you can't just lash out, but you've been harmed or hurt or betrayed or talked down to, and you have to suck it up, and you're just like so angry that the tears are coming to your eyes, that you're just so frustrated and you can't say the things that you want to say. So for example, this one time I was in a new job. I was still in the early stages of the job, and I was really eager to prove myself, and I had a conflict with the VP of sales. And so what ended up happening, there was some miscommunication. It's not really important exactly what it was, and it's not about who was right, who was wrong, none of that stuff. It was just frustration. I felt unfairly attacked. I felt that I was taken to task over the situation, and it wasn't a fair situation. And I was so angry about it because I had to bite my tongue. I had to sit there and take unjust punishment. And I had to sit there and not really be able to speak up about what was happening to me, because I was in that early time frame of where I could be fired without cause. They could just fire me because they didn't like me or we didn't get along or something like that. It would have nothing to do with my skill set or whether or not I could actually do the job. That there was that 3-month window of where you're on a probationary period, and I wasn't allowed. Well, I could have spoke up, but I also would have been at great risk of losing my job, so I didn't want to do that. So at the time, I was so angry about it that anger came out in tears. And so sometimes when we're in a position where we don't have the power, where we don't have the perceived power, or we don't want to make that choice, that seems too difficult, sometimes our anger comes out in different forms, and it's maybe not lashing out, it more goes underground. So we're going to be talking about, if you've ever been in those kind of situations, how can you deal with the feelings of anger? Happened to you as well, John? Yeah, and that's really, really challenging when that happens, right? And so we're going to talk about today. Stick around for the training, stick all the way through. If you can't follow it all the way through, then make sure that you're subscribing to my Facebook group, which is The Happiness Coach. So check that out, or check out my YouTube channel, Coach Tina B 125, and click on subscribe. You'll get notified when I upload the replay of the training. So, excuse me. If you've ever felt that way, you've ever been in that kind of situation, don't worry. We're going to go through exactly what it is you need to do, what you need to be aware of, and how to shift that so that you can get through that in a healthy way rather than a self-destructive way. If you haven't been through that and you're like, Tina, I don't know what you're talking about, then you're probably in stage 1 of the grieving process, and go watch that training in my Facebook group. So if you haven't felt that before, and that's probably you're in stage 1. So today we're going to be focusing on stage 2 of the grieving process, and you're like, what does anger have to do with grief? Wow, that's a good question. And the second stage of grieving is anger, and that is actually a good sign that when that starts to come up, because when we move out of the first phase and we move into that anger phase, we feel the unfairness of things. We feel the unjust situations that we've experienced in life. And this can be anything from the death of a loved one to you know, the loss of a job, loss of an identity, loss of a relationship, anything. And there's just varying stages of how quickly we go through these. And there's all kinds of different ways that we can look at this stuff. So today what we're going to be going over and what you're going to learn is we're going to talk about the different forms of anger. We're going to talk about reacting versus responding. And we're going to talk about healthy anger versus unhealthy anger. And then how you can actually heal using anger. Okay, so stage one is leaving the place, people that it's doing to you. You know, John, that's a good point, and sometimes that can be the solution, but sometimes if you don't actually do the deeper inner work, that lesson is going to repeat for you someplace else until you learn what it is, that lesson, until you extract the lesson from that situation. And really stick around for this, and we're going to dive into exactly how you extract that lesson, how you can dig deep enough to actually get to the core of what it is that this situation is trying to teach you. Okay? All right, so let's go through. So we want to talk about the spectrum of anger. Okay? And on one side, we've got like silence. And for the ease of examples, I'm also going to put a close end is sarcasm. Snide remarks. And gestures. So this is on the mild end of things. Again, the people that are on Facebook, I'm sorry that this is backwards. The ones that are in the Facebook group, I don't know how to change that on my phone. And the laptop is fine, so being in the group is going to help. Okay. So on one end you have either silence, like not saying anything, so think of like silent rage. Women tend to fall into this category. We tend to stifle the rage and push it down, and that is one end of the anger spectrum. The other end is rage. And the best definition of rage that I ever heard that actually helped clarify things for me is rage is uncontrollable hurt. So if you think of a situation like, imagine being a soldier in war and you are out on the battlefield and you have your platoon or your troops around you, and you watch every single one of your friends and your comrades get gunned down and you're the only one left. That is going to bring up so much pain within you. It's going to be uncontrollable hurt. And think of the amount of rage and anger that would come from that situation. And how would you deal with those kind of things? So that's like one extreme of the spectrum. So you go from silent, not really doing anything or saying anything, to rage where it's like a nuclear bomb kind of thing, right? And then in the center, we've got clear communication. Okay, so we have a spectrum of anger, okay? And so this one is obviously much more covert, much more underground. It's subtle. It's kind of, it can slide on under the radar. Somebody does like a snide remark, rolls their eyes, or you know, does a sarcastic little dig at you, and then they try to joke it off, and they're like, "Oh, I was just joking. Why are you being so sensitive?" Yet that is still an act of anger. So the best definition of sarcasm that I ever heard was to tear the flesh. So we are using words to tear somebody apart. And when you think of that visual image, that alone is usually enough to prevent you from really wanting to do that. Now, this also matters, because like this is nuclear bomb side rage, and this is like death by 1,000 paper cuts, okay? Once isn't going to be a big deal. I'm just as guilty as anyone as a good little zinger, sarcastic joke, making fun of somebody, a little joke. But it's when you are doing, it's your intent behind it. So this is why a lot of times sarcastic comments can be written off as, oh, I was just joking, relax, right? And if you do it once, no problem. But if you do it and you can sense somebody's energy behind it, you can sense that they're actually really meaning it, then that takes the fun out of it. It's not a joke anymore. And that is something where you are actually trying to tear the person apart, to tear the flesh. So think of that when you are defaulting. And where do you default? And it differs between people. Somebody that we don't feel like we have as much power over, like say our boss, or say somebody we really care about, we might resort to covert displays of anger versus, out and out rage and violence, right? Obviously, we don't want to hurt the ones that we love. We also don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by losing our jobs and stuff like that. So we can have both ends of the spectrum, and we have to be aware of where we're at. Now, somebody who you don't care about, and they do something that makes us angry, pisses us off, then maybe we might lash out more in rage or verbal rage, where we might, tell them to go fuck themselves, and we don't care what they think, and we feel perfectly justified doing that because they have no attachment to us. When we start having attachment, things change, right? So being aware of the power dynamics and how we feel towards the person and the situation. Do we feel we actually have any power over anything? If we don't feel like we have power in that particular situation, our anger will tend towards more like silence and the sarcasm, snide remarks. If you are not strong enough to outwardly battle the other person, you might default to these kind of behaviors. And if you're on the other side, you might feel like you're powerful and you might feel justified using violence. And those are both very dangerous positions to be at, okay? And being aware of where you are falling on this particular spectrum, depending on what's going on. And there's also a lot of variables, and I cover some of this kind of training in my Facebook group of the types of anger and things that can affect how susceptible you are to anger. And we're not going to cover that in this particular training. So the next piece that we're going to go over is being able to, the difference between reacting and responding, okay? So what I need you to understand is anger is a signal. It is the first stage of the 4 stages of shifting from a perspective of love, which is an expression of love and being open and that, to one of being in fear. Again, these are tools that I go over in the Facebook group. Okay, so when we find ourselves reacting and maybe we want to yell or scream, like maybe we don't go to full rage, but we start raising our voice. And the longer we stay in that, the more likely we're going to head down this path. Because think of, you can always tell a parent at the grocery store where she's yelling at her kids and the kids aren't listening. And no matter how much she yells, the kids don't listen. And it ends up having a law of diminishing returns. The more you use that, although yelling can be a very quick and effective method for being able to get somebody back in line, it diminishes over time. People stop paying attention to it. Kids stop paying attention to it. So if you're yelling at your kid all the time, they're not going to pay attention to it. And then you're going to end up having to do more things. Maybe you have to slam your fist down on the table. Maybe you have to do something else to kind of get the same effect. So you don't want to go towards that way, and you want to use that, although it's an effective method, you want to use that sparingly. You want to save that for a situation like, say, where you need a very quick and immediate result, like your kid is running towards the street and you need to yell at them to get them to stop for their own safety. You're not yelling at them because you're frustrated. You're yelling at them for their own protection. There's a big difference, and anger can be a tool and used in that particular way for their benefit. But you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very self-aware when you are using that tool, and you also have to be aware of how frequently you're using that tool, because the more you use that, the worse it's going to get and the less effectiveness it has. Now, on the other side, okay, the frequency. So thinking of, we have to know what we're capable of, right? You know, we have to understand where our monsters are. Are our monsters more covert? Is that angry monster of our side that we've learned to kind of go underground with our anger and play innocent? And this usually means that you've been in power dynamics where you didn't feel like you had any control. So it kind of comes out as whiny, backbiting, little bitch kind of energy, right? And so when you find yourself in that mode, what you need to understand is that there's a power dynamic where you don't feel like you actually have any control over your situation. So you are expressing your anger in these underground ways. And so that comes out as whininess, victim, helplessness, silence, those kind of things. And sometimes people are like, oh, you know, well, they were completely silent. They're using it to punish me. And that is a punishment, not being able to talk about things, because think of it, the balanced approach is clear communication. But what you need to understand is if somebody is in that silence mode, they are in a state of fear. Same thing if somebody is in the rage mode. They are in a state of fear. They're two sides of the same coin. They're both anger. Anger is the first stage of fear. Okay? So you have to be aware of where you're at on the spectrum, what's going on for you, and know that if you're more on this side, it's because you don't feel like you have any power or control. And then this side, you feel like you have too much power and control, and you have all of this energy, and you are seeking immediate relief. So what you have to understand, though, is while you have rage, you can get immediate relief. Like if you blow up and everybody just leaves you alone or does what it is that you want, then you're going to get immediate relief, but there are long-term consequences, and sometimes those consequences are not something that you can actually repair. So same thing with, you might think, oh, well, it's just a snide remark. It's like, you know what, I needed to be silent. I was going to say some mean things. Okay, fair enough. That can be a pretty good strategy, but how often are you using that tool? And again, short-term relief, long-term effects. The more you do that, the less effective it becomes. The more you have to do it to get the same results. So it has a law of diminishing returns with this. So you have to be careful as to where you are at. And so coming to the center, getting to a clear communication, it takes personal accountability at a really, really high level. And it means looking inward, not outward, because people can do really shitty things to us. But at the end of the day, we choose whether we're going to react or if we are going to respond. And the more balanced and centered we are, the more inner work we've done, the more we have control over our ability to respond. If we haven't done this inner work, we feel like we're reacting to everything, that we have no control over ourselves. And it's like, well, if they hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have said that, and it's all their fault. And you know what? You can be 100% right, but I promise you that will not make you happy. Okay? And you will start gravitating towards things like this, because now you're saying, it's because of them that I reacted this way. It's because of them that I did X, Y, Z. Doesn't matter what it is, but you're now slowly losing your power. You're starting to feel like you have no control over your own life and your own responses, your own reactions. You can't communicate clearly. You can communicate sarcastically. You can communicate through snide, vicious remarks. You can be judgmental. You can be all of these kind of things. If you find yourself in that space, know that you are angry. Okay? So these are the harder ones to see. It's really easy to sit and judge the guy that's, putting his fist through the wall and saying he has anger issues or she has anger issues. But looking at ourselves and looking at our more covert anger issues are something that takes a really deep self-awareness and a higher level of accountability, right? Because this guy just has to stop putting his fist through the walls and he'll improve. This one goes from silence, and you go from silence to sarcastic remarks, you're still an asshole. So it's harder to go this way, right, and heal this way than it is from rage to calming the fuck down, right? So, and yes, for those of you who are not aware and this is your first time, yes, I do swear, especially when we're talking about the subject of anger. So, what I do promise, I may not be perfect, but I will be authentic. Okay, so you will get the real deal here, and I'll talk to you in a way that would make sense for me, because when people shared this way for me, it actually gave me the most value. It gave me the ability to look at things that were too hard to look at, because somebody actually shared with me first of what they felt, because I can tell you, I didn't need any help in the beginning. I didn't even think I was angry. I was fine. I forgave everybody. It's okay. It's not a big deal. I've moved on. Logic. Hadn't dealt with any of the emotions. And dealing with those emotions, when that anger comes up, it is a good sign. It is part of the healing journey, and it can actually be really beneficial if we use it the right way. So we have healthy versus unhealthy anger. What is the difference? So on this side, we often tell ourselves when we're in that covert, I can't talk about it, I don't want to say anything, sarcasm, snide remarks, facial gestures, you're just like, I can't tell you to go fuck yourself, but I can roll my eyes at you, that kind of stuff. And that happens a lot in business, that happens a lot in relationships where we don't want to seem like the bad guy, right? So I have experienced both sides, and I think we all have at some point. And if you haven't experienced that side, I can promise you you're in stage 1 of the grieving, and definitely check that out. So on this side, it's like I'm never supposed to express. Never express. Anger. That is extremely unhealthy. There are things, anger is a sign, it's our emotions, it is a sign saying that something is wrong. And we've now slipped into a state of fear. Hey, Saeed, good to see you. We've now slipped into this state of fear, and we are in that first stage of fear. I'm doing well, thank you. So when we are in that first stage of fear, what we can end up having is, and if we're in that never express anger, right? So this is like a little bit of the toxic positivity. So we're talking about anger and the healing power of anger. So I'll pick up there. All right. And you'll probably have to catch the replays on this because we're about halfway through. So, but I'm glad that you were able to join us. Okay. All right. So, and if you don't deal with the anger that you feel, if you feel anger and then you suppress it down, you actually can't talk about it. What it ends up transforming to is depression. So any emotion that we suppress, we depress down, it starts to eat away inside, internally at us. And when we suppress one emotion, we actually end up suppressing all of our emotions. We can't numb one without numbing them all. And so getting from a place of being numb or depressed or suicidal thoughts, which I have experienced myself, and moving into a phase of anger is actually progress, okay? It doesn't feel like it, and if you're not used to dealing with those feelings, you might be, oh my God, I'm going to burn the whole world down. What am I gonna do? I don't want to be like, and oftentimes we choose this side because we don't want to be like the bad guy in our life. Maybe somebody yelled at us or screamed at us or was violent to us in some way, and we never want to be an example of that. And sometimes we end up sliding from this end of rage and violence over to silence and sarcasm. And those are both opposite ends of the spectrum, and they are both still ineffective ways of dealing with anger. And they will harm you on either side. And so if you find that you are suffering from a lot of depression or feeling numb or just not caring about life or anything else, know that it is anger. It is you not feeling like you have control over something in your life. You don't have control over a situation, and you don't feel like you can speak up about it. And so when we look at that, what we can start to do is we can start to ask ourselves different questions instead of making statements. So asking ourselves, what is it that I'm afraid of? If I said what I was really feeling, what do I feel is going to happen? And sometimes facing that can be really, really challenging. But it is also the same pathway that we actually get through things, that we can actually start to heal, is when we start asking ourselves, what is it that I'm really afraid of? Now, on the rage side, same thing happens, right? Maybe let's give a simpler example of rage. You're at the office, the damn photocopier won't work, and all you needed was one stinking copy quickly before a meeting, and now you can't get it because it's just being a pain, and you're frustrated, it won't work, and you just feel like you want to Hulk smash this machine. And so that is more on the rage side. And so we have to ask ourselves when we're in that state, what is it that I'm afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of going into the meeting and not having the piece of paper that I needed that had the notes, and I'll feel unprepared, I'll feel like I'm incompetent, I'll feel like people are thinking I don't know what I'm doing. There's all kinds of fears that trigger this rage that are coming out. And maybe you're like, maybe it's something else too. Maybe it's like, I told them last week this damn copier wasn't working and they still haven't fixed it. Again, it is fear. What if they don't fix it? What if they don't respect my opinion? What if they don't listen to me? And so we end up having these explosions of rage that end up coming up because we are not addressing and we are not asking ourselves, what is it that I'm afraid of? Because maybe it's like, okay, the copier's not fixed and I'm afraid because I've told this guy to fix this thing 10 times now and it's still not done. And if this continues, I'm actually going to have to let him go. And maybe you're afraid of having to take that action. Because if we actually tell the truth about what it is that we're feeling, it's oftentimes easier to feel empowered with anger than it is to face that fear that we're hiding from. Whether we're hiding in a covert manner or we're hiding in a more aggressive, overt kind of method. But either way, so overt is always expressing anger. And you might have learned that it's much more effective to be aggressive. A good offense is better than a good defense kind of situation. Maybe you found that, you know, the guy who yells the loudest wins, or the guy who's the toughest wins, or the girl that is the biggest bitch wins. Whatever it is, it's still a state of fear. And it always, especially on that end, will have a law of diminishing returns, okay? And it is very destructive. So our goal is to get to the center, heart-centered communication. This is a place of love where we can communicate anger in a way that is healthy, that is constructive, instead of destructive. Both of these two extremes are very destructive. One is immediately destructive, the rage, like the nuclear bomb, and this is like black mold kind of destructive, where it causes a lot of damage that you don't even really realize is happening until the damage is really big and it's been going on for a long time, and that becomes harder to repair. So being aware of which end of the spectrum on and how you're expressing your anger and what's going on for you, and being able to ask those questions internally is going to help you a huge amount with being able to heal and to get into a situation where you are clear, heart-centered communication, where you're speaking out of love for yourself and love for the other person. And you are no longer running away from your fears. You're no longer avoiding the fear, and you can face it head on, okay? That's when you can actually speak and communicate about the things that have made you angry or upset you while they're small and it's easy to fix. If you avoid them, then it ends up being a much bigger project to clear up, okay? So this leads us to the healing power of anger. So like I said, we've got silence on this side. So this one, let me do a different color. This one is low energy. And think of like it's all underground, so it's like a molten core. It's like lava underground. It's hard to get to. There's a lot of energy and a lot of anger when you dig in and you get underneath it. And then this one is high energy. And it's explosive. So it's visible for everybody to see. It's explosive, it is high energy. Think of a forest fire, right? It's out of control and it's dangerous. So what we need to do is we need to be able to harness the energy. Just like we harness the energy of gasoline in a car, it allows us to turn it into something actually useful. if it is underground and it's like a molten core, it's not very useful. There's a lot of energy, but we can't tap into it, and it's not good, and it's hidden, okay? Where on the other side, if it's exploding or it's a fire that's out of control, it's dangerous. It's going to hurt people, and we don't want that either. So what we have to do is we have to leverage the opposite end of the spectrum and tie into that. And so if we find we're in that rage, we're ready to explode, our blood is boiling, we're just going to slam our fists through the wall, we want to slam doors, throw things around, we have a lot of energy. And number one thing we're going to do is we're going to silence. Shut the fuck up. Don't speak. Don't say anything. Give yourself time. You need time. So we're going to leverage silence. When we find ourselves on this end of the spectrum, we're on the rage end of the spectrum. Shut up. Don't say anything. You need to sit with that energy. Don't say a word. And you're like, but Tina, you told me that silence is a bad thing. Yeah, but it's less bad than blowing up. Okay? So if you find that you gravitate to this end of the scale, start leveraging silence. Okay? Now, if you gravitate to this end of the scale, you just don't say anything. Oh, you just let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. And then you get sarcastic, and then you get whiny, you get depressed, you get numb, all of those kind of things. Well, now we have to, in order to heal, we need to leverage the other end and be more vocal. We need to dig down to tap into this energy of the molten core. And we have to start expressing it. Now, there's ways that you can express it. You don't have to swing all the way over to rage and start like losing your shit. But usually a way you can start digging down by asking yourself, what is it that you're afraid of? Why do I feel this anger? Where is this coming from? Where have I felt this before? Those are the kinds of things that you want to start asking yourself. And journaling really helps with this one, especially because I know myself, I tend to default to this. If you've gotten me to this point, that's impressive. That's really impressive. It takes a lot to get me to that point. Some people have a better knack for it than others. So digging down and being able to journal and write these things out, and the more honest you can be, the more open you can be, the better you're going to get results out of it. And you're going to start to be able to balance yourself and get to that heart-centered, clear communication. And this is where we actually can harness the power of anger, and we can actually start to contain it in a way that allows us to channel it to be a force for good. Because let's face it, there's a lot of things that go on in this world that are anger worthy. They're rage worthy. There is a lot of pain in this world and rage is uncontrollable hurt. There are a lot of things that we see hurting people in this world. But raging and blowing up about things and blaming the other side is not effective. It's a wildfire. It's dangerous, and that turns into war. And that is not helpful, right? Being on this side and just being silent and complacent is just as dangerous. And so understanding where that pain is coming from, where that fear is coming from, being able to harness the other side and pull it in like a string and be able to create a way to contain it allows you to use it as productive energy. And now we can start to clearly communicate what the problem really is. What is it that we're afraid of? If we continue on this path, these are the results that I see happening, and I am just looking for a solution. And that's how we shift from fear-based anger into love-based solutions, okay? This is where we start looking for, how do we fix this? Because now that we're at a place where we're not trying to blame each other, we're not trying to hurt each other, it's your fault I'm angry and it's your fault you hurt me. No. Now we're like, okay, this sucks. I don't like it. I know you don't like it. So what can we do about it? How do we work together to actually fix this stuff? How do we come together and express love to one another and see that there is a way to solve this problem if we work together? But as long as we're divided and as long as we're against one another, oh, I don't say anything, I don't act like that. Oh, she won't even speak up about it, right? Just look at her. She's just silent, shuts me out, and then I just get more and more angry about it. And I'm using those typical ones because women tend to do more silence and men tend to be more vocal and stuff like that. And so, but it's not always that way. Men can just as easily be the whiny little backbiting bitches and women can be the rage monkeys. So it's not a gender thing. It is a matter of which end of the spectrum did you end up learning was more effective for you. And it changes depending on who you're dealing with, right? I'm pretty sure even if you tend to be the one that maybe rages and yells and screams and loses their temper, I bet you if I put you in a business situation where money was on the line, you could lose the deal, you could lose faith, you could lose you could lose reputation if you lost your temper, if you lost your cool. I bet you you'd know how to shut the fuck up. I bet you would. And if you knew that if you stayed silent, that somebody you love was actually going to get hurt really, really bad, would you start fighting? Would you start speaking up? Would you take the risk and actually communicate in a way that's effective and say, this isn't right. We can't handle staying this way. We have to do something differently. So in order to use anger properly and use it for a force of healing and a force of good, a healing power rather than a destructive power, we have to be able to actually understand where are we on the spectrum and what is it that we need to do to be able to understand where is the fear coming from. What is it that I need to change? This isn't anybody else outside of me. This is what do I need to change? What do I need to understand about my own fear? And when you can do that, you can actually harness anger as a power for good. Okay? So now there's some rules that you're going to have to follow in order for this to be effective and not destructive. Number one rule is I am in control of my own behaviors and my own actions. And sometimes we're going to mess up. Guess what, guys? Sometimes you are going to scream. You are going to shout. You're going to slam your fist through the wall or, do something that is an explosive outburst. Other times you're going to go stonewalling. You're going to go silent or sarcastic and backbiting and, the little to tear the flesh kind of techniques. It's not a matter of trying to be perfect. It's a matter of recognizing where you're at and understanding what fear got you to that point so that you can come back to center, heart-centered. Okay? The second thing, and if we're always taking responsibility for our own behaviors, our own actions, then we're going to be less likely to want to slide back into the extremes of these, and we're going to stay closer to center. We might fall a little bit to, I don't really want to talk about it, or, you know what, I've had enough of this shit, right? You get a little bit crusty about things. It's okay. Understand that this isn't about right or wrong. This is where am I on the spectrum, and how do I get back to center? Number two is I am not allowed to harm myself. So if you're on this side and you're thinking suicidal thoughts because you're in a depressed state and you've been that way for a very long time, you are not allowed. You're just not allowed. It is a non-negotiable. Okay? Anchor that piece in. And trust me, when you are feeling completely powerless and completely like you have no control over the situation that's going, I can promise you, suicidal thoughts will come to mind. It is your mind's attempt of regaining control. I may not be able to control the experience that I'm having right now, but I can control whether or not the exit happens. And that's where suicidal thoughts come from. So know that if you are in that state, you are just feeling out of control, and this will pass. I can promise you. So whatever you do, sit on your hands, lock yourself in a closet, do whatever you got to do, reach out to somebody. Find something that you have control over to help shift you back out of that space, because that's dangerous. But that is rule number 2. You're not allowed to harm yourself, and you're not allowed to harm others. So if you need to zip it, then do that. Don't speak. Don't say anything. Maybe you just have to tell somebody, you know what? I need a timeout. I'm going to withdraw myself so I'm not a danger to myself or others. So I need to step back. I need to pull away. I need to collect my thoughts so I can come back and communicate in a clear manner that is not destructive. So ask for what it is that you need. Know that you need that space, and it's okay to ask for that. Because you are not allowed to harm yourself, and you're not allowed to harm others. Number 3, when I can admit my own fears in the situation, I will instantly dissolve all anger. When I can admit my own fears in the situation, I can instantly dissolve all anger. Because all anger is an expression of fear. And the longer you stay in it, the longer you will go through the 4 stages of fear. And I cover this in my training in the Happiness Coach Facebook group. Go over there, request to join it. I've got 8 modules in there of the core foundational tools that I use on an ongoing basis. And I will continue to do training. And training like this is going to be done in that Facebook group, not on my main Facebook page. So if you want more of this kind of training, you find it interesting, you find it helpful, please, this will be all about personal training and helping you shift from those negative emotions into happier emotions, okay? And when I say that when you figure out that fear, all anger will dissolve when you are able to own your fears of the situation. It's because fear is false evidence appearing real. Love is the only thing that is real. So when we recognize, it's like reducing infractions, right? You know, so if you have 4/6, you're supposed to reduce that to 2/3 to get to the solid fraction, right? The solid core. So it's the same kind of thing, is when we have anger, we have to reduce that to its core, which is fear, understanding where that fear is coming from. That is a much easier thing to address because, first of all, it's not real. Now we just have to focus on what is the solution, what is the love, how do we express love. And number 4 is I am responsible for all of the messes in my life that were created by me not recognizing my own fear. Now, to be fair, sometimes these are learned behaviors. Sometimes these fears aren't even ours. It's fears we've been conditioned to believe, which most of the time, it's like somebody else planted seeds in our garden and we didn't want those, and those are weeds, and we need to pull them out. So any of the messes or the overgrown weeds or the nasty looking garden are all because of our own inability to recognize our own fears. And so when we start to recognize them, then we can actually start to deal with, do I actually want this in my life, or do I want to pull this out and plant something else, something that's better? You know, maybe I want to plant tomatoes or carrots or something that's useful, right? Or maybe just pretty flowers, whatever it is. But we're responsible to clean up the messes that are created by our inability to recognize our own fear. Okay? And then the last one is, like I said, just like reducing a fraction, when we get down to the root cause of fear, now we have something we can actually work with. Now we can start addressing, well, what are the real fears here, and how do we shift you from crying out for love to receiving love? And when I want you to think of fear as, imagine you see a child by themselves, they're maybe 4 years old, and they're by themselves and they are terrified, they are shaking with fear, and they're sitting by the side of the road. What is your immediate response to that child? Are you likely to go up to that child and start yelling at them and raging, going, why are you even by the side of the road? Don't you know it's dangerous? This is a terrible place to be. How could you be so stupid? No. You would be like, oh my God, why are you by the side of the road? Come here, let me help you. Let me nurture you. Let me care for you. Let me bring you back to safety. Let me bring you back to love. That's what we would do when we recognize something as fear instead of anger. Anger is scary. It's like, oh, I gotta stay away from that. Oh, they're a bitch. I don't want to talk to them, right? You tend to avoid it if it's in anger. But if you can reduce it down to a smaller state, if you can reduce it down to fear, now you know what to do. Now it's easy. How do I fix this? How do I help? How do I save them? How do I be the hero instead of the villain? This is what it means to be able to tap into the healing power of anger. Now we can communicate. Now we can go, why was that child at the side of the road? What can we do to prevent the child from being at the side of the road? What happened to get them there? And if we find out that it was their parent that left them there, or they got lost, it's a very different circumstance, right? So now we can actually start creating solutions. Now we can start addressing bigger problems. Now we can harness that energy of anger and being able to channel it towards doing something good in this world. Okay? So this is the training for today. I had a great time being able to present this, and I hope that you guys got a lot out of it. So there's two ways. If you jumped in a little bit late or you didn't get to watch all of it, you can either subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B. Make sure you click subscribe. You'll get notified when I upload the replay of this training. If you are on Facebook, then go to the Happiness Coach Facebook group and request to join the Facebook group. Make sure you answer all of the questions, please. I need you to understand that we need to be all on the same page, and I'm creating a safe place. If you do not answer all of the questions, or you don't want to participate, you don't want to give your email, you don't want to do the 8 foundational trainings, they're all very short, maybe 10-15 minutes, there's one that's 30 minutes. But if you don't want to do that, then maybe this isn't the right group for you. And you can try to catch me live on TikTok, or you can watch the YouTubes whenever you're ready. But there will be additional training, and it's all about free personal happiness coaching, okay? I will eventually have a new offer that is focused more around business owners and helping business owners be happier and helping their teams, their customers being happy. And that more will deal with a change management approach. But this personal happiness coaching is going to be the foundation. So if you think you might want to work with me in the future, then I highly recommend joining my Facebook group so that you can get to know my style, you can get to know my vibe, it won't cost you anything. And hey, if you can take something from it and you can apply it to your life, and it helps make you happy, and you're smart enough to figure out how to take that and just apply it to your business and your teams and everything like that, and you're able to just take that and run with it, please go do that. It's going to help the world in a lot better way than just me trying to do it on my own. So, but if you come into the group and you find that you do really like my style and you can benefit for some additional coaching, more either a group style or a one-on-one, then reach out to me and we can talk, okay? There will be more information on that as I go along, and that'll be in the group, okay? So guys, with that, I hope you have an amazing week. Happy Monday, and we will see you next week, all right? Unless you're in the group, you might get more trainings. All right, take care. Bye.